Okay, here we are. I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an institute for the humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. And the purpose of this broadcast, live, thanks to your generous donations and recording, is to announce the Harriman Solstice Hike 2025. This is an altogether free event, so I have to make you pay somehow. And for that, you will get your song. And then we will get into the who, what, when, where, how, and why of this most memorable day of naked hiking, swimming, conversation, and all of these good things. All on the solstice, mind you, or near enough this year. Anyway, your admission is this song, and it is entitled The Maid of Cabaret West. It's a song of romance and drama from not the folk tradition, but actually from the music hall tradition of the 1920s and 30s, hence the slang you might notice. The Maid of Cabaret West. Oh, it's all for the love of a fair young maid in Cabaret West did reside. Meself lived up in Donnybrook, 'twas a 1 and a 2 penny ride. But there was a fly in the ointment now that you very seldom see. For although I loved her terrible well, she was in love with a Portuguese. Now, he was a nasty piece of work, Don Salazar was his name, and he could not wait to get his paws and conjecture who was my dame. So I made a vow by the moon and stars that I would do him in, for I do not like those Portuguese boys. In particular, I didn't like him, so I followed them up to the restaurant one evening just for fun, and up by the Mercer Hospital and around by Bartney's Dun, and there they were in the corner seat just sitting and holding hands. And there he was seducing her with pints of baby sham. So I followed him off to his lodgings there in Rathgar thereabout, and I caught him down the alleyway, and I battered him inside and out. He let out many an oath and cried till he was dead, I'm sure. Then I opened up the manhole lid, and I threw him down the sewer. Now, when the ma she heard of this, she made me life a hell. So all for the sake of peace and quiet, I did her in as well. So now I'm up before the judge to answer for my crime. He says, I didn't mind the first time, John, but not the second time. So it's all for the love of a fair young maid and her Portuguese sailor boy that I've landed here in irons now. I'm shackled in Mountjoy, and if I ever get out again, I'll change my ways, you see. I'll marry a girl from Harriman State Park who wouldn't look at a Portuguese. So there you go. There's your admission, your price of admission. Okay, so here we are, more seriously, although not too seriously, for the Harriman Solstice Hike 2025. Let's get some more copacetic music for this calming friendship event. And so we shall. Okay, so I'm going to run down on my little itinerary the who, what, when, where, how, and why of this event. And then if you have interest, if I haven't scared you off already, we'll get into the history of this hike and of the park and some other point. But I want to get into the nitty gritty, especially those of you who are just nuts and bolts people. And to do that most effectively, we're going to have the screen share here. And we'll run down what you need for the June hike. And we'll go from there. So great. Always have to check the tech. There's nothing worse than speaking for 20 minutes and knowing that the camera's kicked off, which happened to me the other day. So you will bear with me on the technical front. Anyway, we're looking here at the beautiful Litchfield County Naturist website, which is a subwork of ApocatastasisInstitute, a college here in Connecticut. Yes, we have classes. Yes, we have students. Yes, we have other teachers. This is a real college, and that's a whole other discussion. But yes, this is part of that work, and you'll be hearing more about that going forward. And this is the LCN, Litchfield County Naturist page. of our dear school. And I will get into at the end of this presentation how it is that Litchfield, Connecticut, Litchfield County Naturists ended up coordinating this event, which long precedes us. But first things first, we want to get into the who, what, when, where, how, and why of things. So this event is for you. This is a naked hiking event on the 20th of June. And this is for you. I don't care who you are. Do you have a heartbeat? Are you able to get to Harriman? Then we want you there. Okay, I'm not going to run down a whole list of different combinations of relationships and this, that, and the other, which I frequently get on emails and so forth. If you're alive and you can get to Harriman, we want you there. Okay, this is open to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, every butcher, baker, and candlestick maker. So there you go. Married people, single people, families, young kids, teenagers, elderly people, as long as you can make your way around and not get a heart attack, everyone's welcome. Okay, what are we doing? Well, as already alluded to, this is a nude hike and swim, which will take the guts of the day of June 20th, right? So once we get out of the parking lot and into the wood line, we peel off. And then we are nude for the remainder of the day until we come back to our cars. And I'll get into why that is part of the hike at the end of this rundown. But that is what we're looking at. When is this? Well, as you can see, again, the real basic bones here are on the screen and on our website. This, again, is on Friday, the 20th of June. The rain date is the 23rd of June, the following Monday. The solstice, if you do this long enough, like I have, you come to find out the solstice isn't actually pegged to the 21st. Sometimes it's the 20th. It actually is the 21st this year, but the 21st is a Saturday, and we never have the hike on a Saturday or Sunday because the Harriman State Park is too crowded with people. And even getting a parking lot, I'm told, or rather a parking space in the lot, is a difficult thing to do on a weekend, a random weekend. It's a very, very rare thing to get a parking space in the entirety of the park. This is what I've been told repeatedly by many, many people. So we have always had the hike during the weekdays. Also, because the park is more crowded, it would be different to constantly be coming across clothed hikers. Not to say that we won't and that we haven't during the weekday, but it's a little bit more relaxed. You're not just constantly in this crowded park. So that's why we always have the hike on a weekday. And this weekday will be Friday, the 20th of June. The step off will be 10 a.m. If you don't know the hike path, you need to be there by 10 a.m. If you do, you can be a little bit later because you don't need to wait for the group to guide you up. You know how to get to the two locations. Okay, there we go for the when, as well as indeed the rain date, the following Monday, the 23rd. Where is this? This hike is at the Harriman State Park. I have a map queued up, and I'll go over the pathway roughly soon enough. But the most important thing is that we are meeting at the Lake Sebago boat launch. I trust you can see my cursor. We are meeting in New York State's Harriman State Park, not Vermont, New York, New York, New York, New York's Harriman State Park. And you want to come at, or before, preferably before 10 a.m., to the Lake Sebago boat launch. Not the Sebago cabins, not the old Sebago beach. You want the Lake Sebago boat launch. That's the site, that's the lot that we are meeting at. And if you just mention that to the park custodians at the office, they'll be able to guide you there if you don't know your way around the park. The Lake Sebago boat launch. The hike is about, I would say, one way, 4 miles, F-O-U-R, 4 miles. And I really do trust and hope that you can see my cursor. If not, you can just find this on the map yourself. But we start at the Lake Sebago boat launch. We cross the road Seven Lakes Drive. And once we're in the wood line, everyone is welcome as they feel comfortable to strip off. Hopefully, eventually, sooner than later, everyone will be nude on the hike. It would be very awkward, wouldn't it, to not join in the naturism of the day. But we hike from there, roughly, up to Lake Wanasink. I'm not an Indian, and neither are you. You can't pronounce that any better than me. But it's this fella here, right in the middle of the lake. This is our first swimming hole. Now, I should point this out, that the initial climb after we cross the road, the initial climb for probably a quarter of a mile is somewhat moderate. It has happened probably to at least half a dozen people over the years that they look at the initial ascent, the initial rise, and they become intimidated and they leave. And I shouldn't just say that they become intimidated. Maybe they have health reasons for that. And I'll get into some health concerns later on in this presentation. But you should be aware that once we get out of that parking lot, the initial climb for about a quarter of a mile will, mildly tax you. So it's not Mount Everest, but there is a bit of physical exertion there. And in the past, people have found that to be a bit much for them. I don't think that's always been well-founded, but who am I to say? I would just advise you that there is the rise and not to be too daunted by that. And then we come up here, one of these old access trails, if you can see my cursor, and then at Lake Wanasink, we have our first break, and this allows us to wait for the second group. Nobody is going to be left behind on this hike. And so there's a second group for slower, more leisurely hikers. And this first break at Lake W, let's say, allows that second group to bring up the rear, so to speak, and to join us in a leisurely fashion, where all of us then make our way for another mile or so to Pine Meadow Lake. And this is our main location for the day. This is where we take our lunch and where we recreate and swim and chit-chat as long as we like through the afternoon into the early evening even. Now, there is another way to get to Pine Meadow Lake, which I have never taken, but there is another route which is quicker. I leave it to you to discern that. I only know the longer route that the bulk of the hike takes. So at Pine Meadow Lake, we have our afternoon fun, and then we head back in the manner I described at the beginning of this broadcast and recording, people coming back mid-afternoon, late afternoon, whatever, at their pleasure, and then departing piecemeal from there. So that answers the where of this great day. It also answers somewhat of the how. So under the, who, what, when, where, how, and why, the how, I would also just use this opportunity to mention a few odds and ends. That is, first of all, if you're not used to barefoot hiking, then you ought to bring, and all of us ought to bring, even if we are used to barefoot hiking, a good pair of sneakers or a good solid pair of sandals, not flip-flops. Even myself, who fanatically goes barefoot in all sorts of ridiculous terrain, even I cannot do this whole hike both ways without hobbling and crawling along by the end of it, just with the rocks and different things, because it's not just all a dirt path or just an outdoors path. There are areas where for whole stretches of half a mile, let's say, it's all rocks, and all big pointy rocks, not pebbles, not beach pebbles or whatever. So anyway, everyone should have, even as a backup, even if you want to barefoot it, you and I need to have some footwear Also, a towel to dry off on and to sit so that the pine cones and whatever, bark and whatever, dirt doesn't stick to us. So a towel, footwear, water, 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 water. Start hydrating. I learned this in my Civil War reenacting days. In fact, start hydrating before the Harriman event, 2 and 3 days beforehand. Drink, 50% more water for those days beforehand. Super hydrate. Last year we had problems with this, and I'm going to address that with some provisions that we're making this year. But water, and of course a lunch and some sustenance to keep you going. Take it from some idiot, me, who hasn't worn sunscreen in the past. Bring sunscreen. Right, we're going to be under the sun. There at both swimming locations, there's no real shade, especially the second location. Bring sunscreen, bring bug spray, and you should be good as gold, right? So to recap, good footwear, a towel, water, 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 food, and sprays. 5, 6 things. I think you can handle it. I think I can handle it. You want to bring a musical instrument? You want to bring a volleyball? You want to bring whatever? That's fine too. That's great. It's more than welcome. I brought guitars and things in the past. Okay, why are we doing this? For a few different reasons, but the one that's most appropriate and the most to the nerve of things is that the purpose of Apocatastasis is to encourage culture. And one of the great ways, not the only way, not for everyone, but one of the great ways to do that is through social nudity. This naturist environment allows people to be more open, allows people to be freer, allows people to, in a almost sacramental sense, cast off the barrier of society, and that allows friendships and ease to form. So the purpose of our school, you boil every single thing we do down to the nub, or down to the whatever you boil things down to. We exist, the Institute exists, and LCN exists to encourage culture and friendship and comity and community, that most abused word. So the reason we're doing this, and the reason we get all sorts of flack from having this nudist group, is for that purpose, is to build community, to build friendship and openness. And please God, we have done that as long as we've been around. All right, so that concludes the nuts and bolts part of this presentation. And there's all sorts of other good stuff on the LCN site, including other events. I should point out at this transitional moment of our broadcast that in June, there is also, a little bit earlier, the World Naked Bike Ride up in Vermont. And so there's a big write-up on our site. And then in July, we have, also in June, I take that, so you have the World Naked Bike Ride on the 14th, and then a week later up in Vermont, you guys in Vermont are staying busy. A week later, the day after our hike at Harriman, on the Saturday in Vermont, at Mount Tabor, Vermont, there is another solstice hike, a nude hike. So you may wish to attend that. And then in July with LCN here in Connecticut, we have our Skinny Dip Day, of which I have all sorts of merchandise they've sent me that I can't wait to give to you at the Skinny Dip Day fundraiser. So check that out. We have a beautiful site. I've deliberately put these beautiful illustrations, and I am not the least bit sorry for it. And with that being said, we now properly transition to the second part of this broadcast and presentation for who is interested. It will not take long, but these are some more specifics. So actually, before we get to old Avril Harriman, just a few more things about this Harriman hike, this June of 2025. Now that we've gotten through the basics, the next thing I wanted to bring up is the query and the invitation for donations. Last year, being the midsummer day, it was very, very hot. It was the hottest day that we have ever done the hike, and we had multiple people that had heat, H-E-A-T, heat stroke, or came very near to it. It took us probably 3 times as long. It took all of the groups about 3 times as long to return to their cars because of the amount of breaks that we needed to take. So, regardless of if you donate to this free event, this event, the Harriman event at the solstice and at Labor Day, will always be free. We normally ask for a donation in order to keep some other works with LCN going. We don't for this, partially, as I'll get to the history section. I don't really see this as an LCN event completely. This precedes us, so it would not be completely appropriate to have that admission price. But in any case, we will have, whether or not your cheap ass is going to donate any money, we will have cold water bottles available for everyone who wants them, multiple bottles, cold in a cooler. We will also have a first aid kit. If you would like to donate and contribute to this community provision, that would be most welcome. We're going to have that either way, thanks to other people who have donated, thanks to our students. But if you would like to contribute to that and to the larger work of LCN, there's lots of other stuff we do, but especially to the immediate provisions, the health provisions of water, cold water in a cooler, and our first aid kit, which we did not have last year. Every year is a growing opportunity. If you would like to do that, you can see me at the day, and you can slip a $5 or a $10 in my hand, and I will be most grateful to that, and that will allow us to have more medical provisions in the future. Okay, so there's that. And then finally, as regards the hike directly, the most common question I get concerning LCN is concerning legality. And every year I do this recording and this announcement, I'm always tempted to do a presentation, which would take at least 45 minutes to an hour and a half, on the nature of the legal system and all of this. For this broadcast, thanks to your generosity and recording, I'm just going to say a few points. Okay, the first set of points is simply just for Joe Blow normie. This wants an answer about the legality of things, and then I'll have a part 2. All of this will be brief. So, is this legal? Is it legal to be naked at the Harriman State Park? What's going on? Am I going to get arrested for that? Okay. The location that we are going to is well known to the custodians of the park as being a nude swimming hole. The nudists there know that. Everyone knows that. The people who don't know that scurry along very quickly. Nobody ever gives us stink eye. Nobody ever gives us a hard time. This is a well-known spot. It's tolerated, as all sorts of eccentric behavior, so-called, is tolerated at the park. Also, this is the normie level to, is this legal? Why do the camp rangers exist at Harriman State Park and at every national and state and I suppose local park? Why are there camp rangers? To help people in medical emergencies, to help people who get lost, to see to crashes with animals that happen on the roads around the park, to provide guidance, hiking advice to interested people, maybe hunting regulations. That's why the park rangers exist. The park rangers don't exist to harass naked people swimming, and they don't at Harriman. Also, final point on the normie level of things, also the statutes for nudity in public, if you notice, all have to do with sexual conduct, and it is on the state and on the plaintiff to prove that there is sexual conduct and indeed actually sexual intention to the nudity. Simple nudity itself is not verboten in the statutes of the state of New York, neither likely the town ordinances. You have to prove that there is sexual intent. And in a system which is completely superficial, how do you prove intent? That's a whole other discussion. Okay, so those are your normie things. So yes, you have nothing to worry about being uh, platonically naked hiking around the woods in New York at Harriman or anywhere else. So long as it is for a platonic reason, evidently. Okay, on the deeper level, statutes are not laws. Dun dun dun. Statutes are not laws, and if there is not a corpus delicti, if there is not destroyed property or a wounded body, literally a corpus delicti, or that might actually literally translate to a dead body. If there's not actually something that's damaged, there is no law broken in the actual law. The legal system is not law. That's just a commercial system that was foisted on people, and dummies follow the legal system. If there is nobody dead because you're naked, neither a building that toppled over, then there is no law broken, and it remains upon the state to have the burden of proof. Whether it's the normie answer or the deeper answer, you know if you know type of thing. I don't have time in this broadcast to get into the birth certificate and the admiralty law and all that garbage. No, statutes aren't law, and you have nothing to fear about them. But in either case, now we get to some real talk here. If you and I are not willing to spend a night in jail for our beliefs, then we don't deserve to be free. If we are not willing so much to stand up for our rights legally or lawfully, those are two separate systems, then we're bitches and we deserve to be tyrannized over. So part of that is, yes, what does the legal system say? Okay, we're good there. Okay, none of this stuff actually applies to people who know who they are on this earth. Okay, we're good there. But at the end of the day, if we're not big boys and big girls and we're not willing to fight, I mean, when I say fight, I mean, go through a little bit of legal hassle with some ballless attorney from the Bar Association and to get harassed a little bit, or that ever to happen. If we're not willing to put up that much resistance for our rights to be nude, then maybe we don't deserve them. So I've given actually 3 neighborhoods of thought to chew on as regards the topic of legality. Finally, if I haven't scared you off and bored you already, just a quick note about the history of this event before I knock off for my own dinner. Harriman State Park is named for Averell Harriman, who was a notable diplomat under various administrations going back to Franklin Roosevelt. Strangely enough, in the nudist world, in Vermont, there's a place called the Ledges, and that happens to be at Harriman Reserve, like a water reserve behind a dam. Harriman is a big family in this neck of the woods up along the Hudson River. And initially in the FDR administration, let's see when, Harriman was taken on board, and then he was dusted off after having been governor of New York State. He was dusted off for later administrations. Truman, right? Look at this, right? So in the midst of World War II, Averell Harriman was ambassador to the Soviet Union. Imagine being ambassador to the USSR during World War II. Remarkable. And then, of course, when Roosevelt kicks the can, then you have he carries over into Truman's administration, becomes ambassador to the UK, Secretary of Commerce for Truman, some other points, and then governor of New York in the mid-50s, and then Assistant Secretary of State for the Far East, I think Vietnam, during the Kennedy administration when Vietnam was ramping up around 62, 63. And then carrying on, my goodness gracious, even into the Lyndon Johnson administration, that son of a gun. Wow. So I'll keep my politics to myself, but I wouldn't want my career to be bounded by Roosevelt and Johnson. But anyway, certainly a remarkable figure in terms of the swath of history and the access to notable personages that he had. And he is in fact buried on the property of the on the border, on the border of the Harriman State Park, abutting the state park. Finally, to bring the bird down um, on this unnecessarily long recording, but hopefully a fun recording and a good intro to our time together in June. Just some history about the event itself. So this event was started by a yoga teacher by the name of Beth Nolan, who since moved out west, and in fact presently resides in Mexico. And Beth and I happily stay in touch all these years later. Beth started that hike on the solstice around 2011 with another gentleman. And by about 2013, there was a much more robust nudist group compared to LCN in New York City called Young Naturists of America. You might remember their pen names, Felicity Jones and Jordan was the other fake name, cover name, internet name, whatever, nom de plume, nom de guerre. Of Felicity and Jordan Blum. Yes, that's what it was. Felicity Jones and Jordan Blum. Of course, those were not their actual names. But anyway, LCN really publicized Beth's solstice hike, which is how I personally found out about them. And I think a lot of us found out about them, that great New York City group. And when YNA, Young Naturists of America, went belly up in 2018, that's when our group, Litchfield County Naturists, took over from 2018 until now, and please God, into the future. Of course, we had the COVID years. We did not meet for a hike in 2020. I don't believe, in fact, it was possible to access the park in 2020. Maybe not even 2021. Certainly by 22, 23, we were back in the saddle. So that is a brief history of this great hike. And please God, it will go on for another 13 and another 13 and another 13 and so forth years hereafter. And it will only happen if you patronize the event and make it special. So with that, I have jabbered on far too long, but I do trust I've given you all of the nitty-gritty about this year's hike. And I most especially hope to see you at the Lake Sebago boat launch at Harriman State Park at or before 10 a.m. on Friday, June 20th, rain date 23rd, on this year of grace 2025. Thank you so much and have a great day.